Hello and welcome to the Zach Brown Show, the show that introduces you to old friends for the first time. I'm your host, Zach Brown. Joining me on this episode is Jordan Christie. We discuss his early musical influences, vocational ministry, and how he used rock and roll to help shape the sound of worship music. All that and more coming up. So, hey, Jordan, thanks for coming and hanging tonight.
Hey, buddy. It's good to hang tonight. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a long time. For those who are listening, Jordan and I have known each other and served alongside each other for years, and now we're spread apart across the country, but I'm thankful that we can just get together tonight and just kind of tell stories and learn a little bit more about these things that we have in common. So Jordan,
we're not that far from each other. We're only 4 hours apart, one interstate between us.
Well, it's enough to keep me from not getting to see you every weekend, and that
is very true.
Or grab coffee at Pallanza. You know?
Oh, yeah. Good old Pallanza.
Yeah. So, Jordan, let's start towards the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I'm a military kid. So I was born in Germany. I was born in a little town called Hamburg. And if you're familiar with an old German folk tale called the Pied Piper, that is the town that took place in. So my dad was stationed there back in like Cold War days. This was 1983, which is 37 years ago now, which is crazy. And so I was born there. And then my parents moved to Panama City, Florida for a period of time. I was maybe 4. And then we moved out to Las Vegas, and I spent most of my childhood in Las Vegas from about 4 years old till about 12 years old. And then we moved. Yep. Yeah. All my childhood was out there. It was really cool. And then we moved from Las Vegas to Savannah, Georgia for 2 years. And then from Savannah, Georgia back to Panama City when I was in about 6th grade, and I graduated high school there. Did my first 2 years of college there, and then I moved to Pensacola in 2005 to go to West Florida for college. And then we met somewhere in the 15 years that I was there.
Yeah.
Yep.
What point in your life did music enter? When was that a part of your, not your identity, but just who you are?
My whole family's pretty musical. And so, music was, always in the house kind of thing. And, my mom, it wasn't so much necessarily like, the Rolling Stones playing on the record player as much as it was mom walking around the house singing hymns. And so my mom would just walk around the house singing all day long, and, it'd be anything and everything, but then when we were in the car, the radio was always on. With dad, it was classic rock. It was a lot of old Grand Funk Railroad and Kiss, and the Beatles. Mom listened to a lot of pop country, Garth Brooks and Clint Black and George Jones, and, the 90s, or the early 90s, pop country stuff that was out. And so that was always kind of on. And then, mom always sang in choir. My dad was a drummer at the church, and so I was always around it. And then in 6th grade, I guess, I started playing saxophone, which is like super kind of nerdy, I guess, but like that was kind of where it started. And then
but that was the time. Any great ballad had those saxophone solos, and you had Clarence Clemens.
Yeah, but I wasn't playing like Clarence Clemens. My dad called my band concerts honkathons. So I played the E flat alto saxophone, which is not as cool as the B flat tenor saxophone. No. So it's not quite rock and roll, but that's kind of where it started. Was I just kind of loved being able to make a sound myself on an instrument, but then being able to hear that, as part of a whole thing was just really, really cool to me. And so that was kind of, I guess, where like the love of playing music and kind of the love of I guess the musical, the musical expression. That's kind of where all that kind of came into play. And then somewhere, I don't know, I guess I would have been, about 12, 13, somewhere around there. One Christmas when I was about 14 or 15, we had gone home to see my grandparents, and my uncle was there, and he's a really, really great guitar player and a fingerstyle guitar player, like Phil Keggy kind of stuff. And he was playing a song. I think it's called, I have to look it up, but I think it's called Beantown by an artist named Leo Kottke. And I just remember being blown away by it. I'd never heard a guitar played that way. I mean, I knew I knew electric guitar and things like that, but he was playing an acoustic guitar, and I just thought it was like the coolest thing in the world. And so that Christmas, my grandparents got me a little Ibanez acoustic guitar, one of these kind of $100 starter packs.
Yeah.
It had a VHS tape in it to get started because this was before DVDs. So it had a VHS tape from a guy named Andy Timmons, who he's still around. He makes pedals. Or plays, and then has like, I think, a signature pedal with JHS or something. But he was the instructor on it, and it had a little Mel Bay chord book in it. And I already knew a little bit about like key signatures and stuff, and being able to read music from being in band. And so, so that really served me well, and kind of getting into guitar and kind of being able to go, all right, I know that this group of notes goes together, makes a C major scale. All right, well, let me see if I can figure out where this is at on guitar. And so, so it was around, around 14, 15 is when the music bug really, really bit me. And there were two songs in particular that I remember kind of got me into listening to music. And this is just a sign of the times. It was Flood by Jars of Clay.
Okay.
And Jesus Freak by DC Talk.
Of course.
And that is, I know, super, super cheesy and really, really dates me. But those were sort of like the first two songs I ever heard where I was like, oh, there's something outside of what mom and dad listens to.
Yeah.
And so I listened to those two albums forever. And I still love the Jesus Freak album. I still think that's one of the best albums ever.
Oh, it's a fantastic album.
It's so good. It's so good.
And then you had to shift because you had to learn what drop D tuning was.
I had no idea that was a thing. Yeah. It took me, I didn't know what drop D was until Creed came out, So, but yeah, it was, I started playing saxophone in sixth grade, found acoustic guitar around 14 or 15. And then really started like listening to music around that same time, and realized I kind of had an ear for being able to hear what was there and be able to pick up a guitar and find it, and so, and that was it. And then I guess, around that same time, I started playing in the youth group band at church, and kind of gave up the saxophone and started just kind of, I guess, was the beginning of the journey into rock and roll, So,
yeah. And I'm jealous of you having that upbringing because, I have musical family members, but not in my immediate household. So growing up, I didn't have, dad playing an instrument or my brother doing anything. So it was so much outside influence, and seeing, the worship leader at church or kids in the youth band or whatever. So to have that in your house, I mean, that's really cool that you could have that direct influence.
Yeah, man, I was really, really grateful for that. My grandmother, she passed away, I guess, about 6 years ago now, but she's kind of the one that was really, really responsible for our whole family being musical. She was a great piano player and an amazing organist. I mean, that's kind of a lost art now, but she played incredible organ, and my grandfather was a pastor, so she was always the church piano player and church organ player. And so, just kind of growing up around her, she was always playing in the house, and she always had a little key, one of these little Casio keyboards that had the bossa nova setting on it. She'd have that set up in the house, and she'd let me go to town and play on it. And I mean, I'm sure it had to sound awful, but she really fostered, that love of creativity and art and music. And so, I was really, really lucky to kind of grow up around that. And looking back on it too, like I was lucky that they were all really pretty good musicians and vocalist stuff, like it really shaped my taste and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people grow up around musicians that listen to, crappy music, but my parents listened to really good stuff that really kind of, I guess nailed it into my head, but yeah, anyway, that's a long answer.
No, but it's great. It really helps shape that formative time and kind of taking you into those next steps. And you're saying your grandfather was a pastor, and you started to learn, the guitar and these different instruments. Did worship ministry ever come into like your mind as a young guy? Like, I want to be in the youth band or the kids, ensemble, whatever. Was that ever something that was a part of your thought process?
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. I mean, so when I started playing guitar, I didn't really know a lot of stuff that was on the radio. I knew what was in my dad's record collection. So, I remember one of the first songs I remember playing was a Grand Funk Railroad song. It's called Captain. That might not even be the right title, but it says Captain a lot in the song. but it was like a really big 1970s, hit. And they did an American Band and a couple other songs that, but those were the first songs that I started learning, I think I remember maybe learning, maybe learning Sweet Home Alabama first, but quickly after that, it was, it was jumping into, the Grand Funk Railroad CDs or records that my dad had. And so, listened to a whole bunch of those. And I remember just thinking, okay, I liked the whole saxophone playing in an ensemble thing. But I didn't really want to be in the band anymore. So at church, there was this guy named Jeremy Lloyd, and Jeremy is the older brother of like one of my best friends. Jeremy was just the cool guy that played guitar, and he recognized that like I had a little bit of a knack for it. So he was really, really patient with me. And he was like, hey, he's like, anytime I had a question, he'd sit down and he'd show me stuff. And, he was only 2 or 3 years older than me. But he was always super, super patient. And at some point in time, he was just kind of like, all right, man, jump in here. And so I started playing with our youth group band, which, probably wasn't that great. But there was his brother he was the worship leader, who is still a worship pastor to this day and has an amazing voice. And our other best friend, David, was the drummer in the group. And so the three of us just really loved music. And because of Jeremy's influence, we were all really able to, kind of develop. He had a really great ear. He was a really great musician, and he really kind of taught us the ins and outs of it. And so, I guess jumping into youth group band was a pretty natural thing. I mean, my family, if the doors were open, we were at church. And I think my parents knew that like getting involved in the music ministry would be something that would make me fall in love with being in the church even more. And so, it was a pretty natural fit, man. And, once I got started, there was kind of no looking back, Now, I never knew that it was going to lead to occupational ministry one day, but, it was a pretty natural thing to step into. So.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that. You're talking about the jump to occupational ministry. What does that gap look like in your life, going from, okay, I'm a kid in youth band, there's not a lot of responsibilities, like when you're done, and that's that. Yeah. At that point, were you thinking maybe someday I'll do this? Maybe I'll be a worship pastor. Maybe this will be something that I can do full time. Or was it just kind of like, this is something that I just kind of do because I enjoy it?
Man, I never put any thought into occupational ministry when I was young. In fact, I think probably I thought the opposite. I mean, I grew up in the church in the midst of, I don't know if this term is even relevant anymore, but they called it worship wars. And it was basically the time where the church was transitioning from the old expression of worship of, choir and piano to the more contemporary version of it. And, you'd have the young people, they say the old songs are stupid. And then you'd have the older people say, well, the young songs are 7-11 songs. They have 7 words and you repeat them 11 times. And there was just this infighting. And then too, like, I don't know. I think just the ignorance of youth a little bit. I didn't see things for what it really was. And so in my mind, I made it out to be this like just group of crotchety old white guys that I was like, man, I never want to be a part of this. Like, and so for me, I think in fact, I actually probably tried to stay away from it. Like I never like left the church, but I was always like, man, I don't think I would ever want to be on staff because, they're in there arguing about the paint color of the women's bathroom. Like this is stupid, that was an actual thing that happened. So
I totally feel that. I mean, I remember my dad's, been in ministry most of my life. I remember there was some sort of funeral of one of the people that were on staff, an older gentleman. And this pastor came up to me from another church and he said, "You look really good in a suit." And I said, "Well, thanks." And he said, "Someday you'll be in ministry yourself." And I looked at him straight in the face, Jordan, and I said, "That's the meanest thing anybody could ever say to me." I was like you're saying, I was just like, this is something we do. I'm not away from church or God, but I was just like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. This isn't anything that excites me. There's too much nonsense going around for my own liking. But obviously God laughs at our our
completely, man, completely. So kind of the journey into it was I played all throughout high school in my church youth group band, and then when I graduated high school, I started playing with like a local college ministry BCM kind of thing in Panama City. And so that just sort of, and this whole time I'm getting more and more into rock and roll, and I'm getting into a lot of other stuff outside of DC Talk, and I'm discovering the '90s Stone Temple Pilots and Alice in Chains, and all these kind of bands, and so I'm discovering electric guitar at this point, right? Oh, and Dave Matthews too. Dave Matthews was huge at that time, and but at that point I realized it's like, okay, like that guy I told you about, Jeremy. Jeremy was a really, really great guitar player, and I was like, man, I want to be thought of like Jeremy. I want people to call me and think, okay, if I call Jordan, he's going to come and he's going to play his part and he's going to do really, really good. And so at that point, I'd already kind of like started pursuing the craft of being a good guitar player, but still didn't really have any plans of like it being a thing other than just a hobby, no, at this point there was no, delusions of grandeur in my head, which come later in the story. But at this point I was just thinking, okay, I just like being a good guitar player. But I didn't want to try to move somewhere and make it or anything like that. But then in 2000, I graduated high school in 2002. I do my first 2 years of college in Panama City. And then in 2005, January 2005, I moved to Pensacola. And so when I moved to Pensacola, I started playing guitar at the BCM there. Really, I kind of started just initially to do it as a way to kind of meet people. The band wasn't anything special or anything, but it was just an easy way to get plugged in. And like I said, I did enjoy serving, and I've always enjoyed kind of being able to be like Jeremy to other people. Like if I had knowledge, I liked being able to pass that on and kind of, so BCM was fun. Yeah. BCM was kind of fun. And so during that time, I met a guy named Dan Risen. And Dan was one of my best friends for a long time, still is a really good friend. In fact, I talked to him just the other night. He's got a baby now, which is crazy. We're both dads. And Dan played and wrote a lot of music. And he was like, hey, man, he's like, I've got a bunch of songs. And he liked the way I played guitar. And so he was like, would you ever want to get together and jam? And I had never been in like a real band where like I was creating material. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like it'd be really fun. So he and I started writing a lot of songs together, and we made this band, and it was, we loved Coldplay. And so everything we wrote sounded like Coldplay. Yeah. But we created this band, and it was called Paraloon, which is some fancy astronomy term, with two of our other good buddies, a guy named Jake Rosa and a guy named Brandon Thomas, which everybody knows as Bebo. And the four of us played together for, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years. And that was when like the bug really hit me, where I was like, okay, I love doing this, and I wish somehow that I could make a living out of playing music, whether it be with this band or whether it be with somebody else. So go back the 4 years to sort of the beginning of meeting Dan. At that same time, Jeremy Lloyd's younger brother, Jordan, the two of them had a worship band called Garrison, and they used to travel around, doing camps and DNOWs and summer camps and all that kind of stuff. And they didn't have a bass player. Well, they knew me. Jeremy knew me as a guitar player, and he was just like, hey, you want to just start playing bass with us? And I didn't play bass, but Jeremy was like, I'll show you what you need to do. And so I started playing with those guys. And we were traveling around, doing stuff. Nothing big, like I said, it was DNOWs and summer camps and stuff. But it just kind of made me go, man, I love doing music. I love kind of what comes with music culture, getting to hang out with people, getting to talk to people, just kind of sort of being in this kind of creative realm. But in the same time, because it was doing worship stuff, there was this whole other element that I loved too. Like I was beginning to kind of fall back in love with like serving the church and realizing that, we were created to do this music thing for the purpose of worship. Right. And so that was when I think it really kind of took off, was around that 2005, 6, 7, 8 in that area. And then during that time I met David Wiggins, which we all know. And David Wiggins had a huge hand in really getting me involved in church ministry. So David was the middle school pastor at Hillcrest during that time. And he was like, hey, he's like, would you help maybe lead our band? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I was just teaching young volunteer kids how to play a little bit better. Basically, I wasn't singing; I was just playing with them. And so then that kind of started the relationship with Hillcrest, which later became the first church I worked at. And really, I think, solidified, kind of my love for serving in the church and for being able to kind of use the gifting I had to make church bands better and that kind of thing. And so, again, at this point, I'm still not thinking occupational ministry. I'm just thinking, okay, I'll be a lay leader in church for my whole life and happen to kind of do the band thing. Right. Fast forward, I get married in 2009. I go back to college, finish up my degree, and my wife was like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "I don't really know. I just kind of want to I just want to find a way to play music and help people somehow." That's what I always say is I just want to play music and help people. I end up getting a job working in import and export trade. So I was doing in legitimate business, not art vandalay, like everyone thinks it's like a Seinfeld reference, but ended up doing that for about 2 or 3 years. And in fact, the day that we bought our house, I came home from work. So this is the first house we bought. I come home from the import export job, and my wife Rebecca, she's crying when I come home, and I was like, okay, this is weird. And I don't normally, she's not normally crying when I come home. And so I was like, hey, what's going on? And she was like, this is really weird. She's like, I don't know how to talk to you about this. And she's like, but I just kind of really feel like maybe the Lord's calling us into ministry. And I was like, oh, that's really funny. He hasn't told me that. No, that's not happening. Yeah. And I said, we just bought a house. I said, I got a job that, I don't really like, but I'm doing it so we can have a family and a life. And so I called David Wiggins, and I was like, hey, David, I was like, Rebecca just told me she thinks we're going into ministry. I'm like, not, haha, that's funny. And I remember he said, he goes, I can't tell you what the Lord is going to do in your life, but he goes, I can tell you, that a lot of times when my wife is spoken into things in our marriage, she's almost been prophetic. And he goes, just pray about it. And I was like, all right, fine. So we start praying about it, and it took three years from that point to finally actually go into ministry. We kind of thought it was a calling into missions. And so during that time as we were praying about it, I was pretty hesitant and reluctant to it, but then it just kind of sort of became that thing where I couldn't get it out of my mind. And it really was pretty clear that the Lord was revealing to me that everything he had kind of done with all the music stuff in the past was all sort of the prep work that he was doing in me to make me able to step into the role of ministry. Yeah. All the hanging out with students and learning to build relationships and learning to teach people softly but confidently. All the learning how to kind of distill the essence of the music and break down parts for volunteers and, all of that stuff, the love of going to camps and seeing people's lives touched through music and worship, all that stuff kind of suddenly was obvious that the Lord, that was the training ground for me. And so, I'm kind of jumping all over the place in the story here, but around this time, we had come back to Pensacola just for a weekend to do a D-Now with David. Ben Kimsel was the worship leader. I came over to play guitar, and David had me and Rebecca, and we had our daughter was new at the time. They had a new child as well, Charlie. And so Charlie and Nora and all of us, we went out in the backyard and we're just hanging out. And he was like, hey man, he's like, our church is getting ready to start a new campus. And he goes, Nicole and I've been praying about it and really feel like you are supposed to be the worship leader for it. And I was like, man, that's cool and all. But I said, I don't have any desire to do that. And I said, beyond that, I'm not even a singer. I'm just a guitar player. And he goes, no, you are. And I was like, no, I'm not. And so, so I told him, I was like, yeah, sure, man, I'll pray about it. But, I don't expect anything to happen. And so we started praying about it, man. And I just got so excited about it as we prayed about it. And the Lord just kind of made it so clear that that's what he was going to have us do. And lo and behold, that's where we ended up. And that was it. So at 31, we left business world, jumped into ministry, and haven't looked back since.
Hang tight. We'll be right back. I love coffee. It's part of my morning routine. Without it, I just don't feel like myself. Allow me to introduce you to the official coffee of the Zach Brown Show. Located in Columbia, Tennessee, Oak Hill Farm Coffee Roasters offers a delicious variety of roasts and blends. Every bag of coffee you buy will help mission and humanitarian projects all around the world. What's better than a cup of coffee? A cup of coffee that helped make a difference. Oak Hill Farm Coffee Roasters. Wake up, drink coffee, and go do something great.
Something to be said about David Wiggins. I don't know how it works out, but every time I hear David Wiggins pop up in a story, it's always at this critical juncture in someone's path. It's somebody is looking for some sort of answer. They're looking for direction. They're at their wits' end, and they get a knock at the door of their office, or you run into them in a coffee shop, and there's David's smiling face, and he somehow is just able to read your mail and just give you the encouragement or the loving kick in the butt that you need in that moment. And it's exactly what you need to hear. And I've got to get David on the show some point, because David is a force to be reckoned with. If there is a folding chair in the way, there's a good chance that chair will be flung across the room. Not out of anger, just making a statement. And that's David.
He's a monumental human being, man. I mean, he's one of my best friends. I love that guy to death. I mean, he married my wife and I, but he is absolutely critical in my development as an adult, as a worship leader, as a Christian. He was kind of one of the first guys that was okay with me just being me. Like, I didn't have to put on in front of him. Yeah. And man, that really revolutionized things for me. I was like, okay, wow, this guy's a pastor. He loves the Lord, but he loves me, and
he allows you to work through your stuff with such a grace and love.
He models Jesus, man. He models Jesus. He meets you where you're at. And anyway, I love that guy to death. And he saw something in me that I didn't see. Thankful for it, man. But yeah, that was kind of the long answer to that whole question. Youth group band started traveling around a little bit in college, fell in love with developing teams and get to be in worship atmospheres, and, just loved being in church. And then at some point realized that all of those years were 100% developed to send me into ministry. And so when the opportunity came, the Lord blessed us with a really killer opportunity, and, haven't looked back since. So,
and your style of, call it worship leading, call it band leading, I had the blessing of being a part of it for years, and I'm so missing being a part of it. Your style, I almost refer to it as like the church of rock and roll, because you took all of those tricks that you learned in your playing days out with the different groups, and you've used those, again, the rock and roll tricks from AC/DC and Van Halen and Aerosmith type stuff to teach your musicians how to just beef up a sound, not for the sake of putting on a show, but just really making it sound good. So what is your process? How do you personally communicate that, keeping it within the confines, for lack of a better word, of the church and the worship phrasing, but to still be look, this is how you're going to get a rockin' sound. It's going to sound just balls. Yeah.
Man, I don't know. It's funny. I was literally having this conversation today with my buddy Connor. He's our student worship leader at the church I'm at now. And he's starting to dabble in electric guitar. And I walked in and he was playing. He had the overdrive cranked up to 10, and he was playing these, full on cowboy chords on the electric guitar and strumming like crazy, and, doing the thing that most acoustic guitar players do when they pick up an electric guitar for the first time. They play it like acoustic guitar. And, and I was like, hey man, I was like, that's fun and all, but I said, let me show you just a few things. And, so we jumped into all of this today, and it's funny because, man, he didn't ask for this, but I just lit up, and for the next 45 minutes, just mouth vomit of all the things I get excited about. I think, man, the biggest thing I guess that I think I took away from all the rock and roll stuff is two things really. The first thing, and I think the most important thing, is just to play with confidence. When you watch Malcolm, and you watch Angus, and you watch Joe Perry, and you watch Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher and Oasis, the guys carry this swagger with them. Who's the Rolling Stones singer?
Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, Mick Jagger, like they have this attitude, you know, Keith Richards, he has this attitude. And I think that's key. Like in any really good musician is there is an element of attitude and confidence. Like you approach that instrument, not in a cocky way. I mean, maybe the rock stars do, but you know, I think even in church, like you need to approach your instrument and play your instrument with like precision and a degree of aggression a little bit, you know, like if you're playing electric guitar, man, it's supposed to be this instrument that sort of like lifts, you know? And so, you know, when you drop into that first chorus, hit that chord, man, and hit it like you mean it, you know, hit it like you're mad at your instrument, you know? And I think the same goes for drums and for bass, you know, like, and keys and vocals, anything that you do, like go at it like you're the best player, you know, like, you know, have that attitude, you know, when you go at it. And I know that's like, it's kind of hard to say, cause I'm not saying be cocky and be arrogant. Like that's not
it's a humble, aggressive confidence.
Yeah. It's just like,
that man, makes any sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all, but it's like, yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, man, like hit the guitar and make it mean something, you know, don't like fully commit to it. You know, if I'm going to hit this big, giant open E chord, man, I'm not just going to lightly touch it. No, I'm going to punch it, you know, I'm going to hit it. And I know that's stupid. And like, these are all like silly, just kind of musician buzz terms and stuff. But I think like, that's the biggest thing is like in rock and roll, like those guys just go for it. You know, they go for it and they want the music to have an emotion and a feel. And I think particularly, you know, obviously in worship music, we're not trying to invoke emotion in the sense that we're trying to manipulate emotion. But I think the reason that music is so powerful as a means and a vehicle for our worship is because the emotions do kind of open you up and kind of leave you vulnerable to the Holy Spirit to move. And so I think it's important that, you know, we do approach our instruments with a very intentional mindset, you know, whether it be drums or bass or guitar or whatever. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think with AC/DC and bands like that, you know, that was just sort of the thing for me. It's like, man, like be confident, make sure you know what you're doing, know where you're going, know what the next chord is. And don't, you know, it's one thing to forget something every once in a while, but like go for it. You know what I mean? Like know it well, be able to go in there and really nail it every single time and time again. And so
there's no question when Malcolm and Angus take the stage, I mean, half of them now, but you know what I mean? Like there is there's that wall of sound. There is such a swagger and force that comes out. And, you know, biblically, there's a reason that the worshipers, the musicians were put out in front of the army. I mean, they were setting the tone. They were raising the spirits. They were getting everybody amped. I mean, you think about like Jericho, the walls fell down when they were shouting and the trumpets were being blown. I mean, it was like, let's go get this. It wasn't arrogant. It was a confidence, like you're saying, this force. And, you know, you go to a rock concert, these guys have confidence and force. And if you're out there and you're saying that you're worshiping the creator of the universe, you better show up with some force and confidence. Yep. And I think about, gosh, there'd be nights. I just thank you for these nights. It'd be like 9:00 and you'd be like, meet me up at the church and we're going to haul the amps and the pedals onto the stage and crank them up loud. Nobody's around. And this is how you play. And it was like, with such intention. It was like, no, strum, like hit that chord, let it ring. And then showing up on a Sunday morning and being like, dang, this is another level. It's humility and you know your place and your worth, but saying like, I have earned this spot and by the grace of God, I stand here, but like, I'm going to give it every bit that when we finish these songs and I walk off this stage, like I left it all on that stage.
Yeah. You articulated it just now in a way that I wish I had. When we walk onto the stage, particularly in the worship realm, like we know that we're walking up there with the same power that raised Jesus from the grave, like inside of us. Right. And so we can go up there with a tremendous amount of confidence. You know, the difference in rock stars and what we do, like they have confidence in a way that's self-serving. Like, we're not going up there in our own confidence. We're going up there in the confidence of who Christ has made us to be. Right. And so we know that the grave has been conquered. We know that sin has been conquered and all these things. And so, yes, the confidence we have and the confidence we take into our instruments and into our playing isn't a confidence in ourselves. It's a confidence in what Christ has done. And I think when we, when we can when we can relay that power through our instruments, it helps in just giving people that same sense of power in the Lord that we're experiencing, and so it's like almost in a way, it's like, hitting that. This sounds really silly, and I'm sure anybody who's listening is going to think this is kind of hoity-toity, but it's almost like, your testimony coming through your guitar, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
At all. And so
that's the confidence that you're playing from, I believe.
Yeah,
it's the joy, it's the emotion that is
right
is springing up from you.
Right,
you are conveying that you are celebrating it. You're either dying to your joy or you're dying to your sorrow in that moment. I mean, you're letting it all out through those 6 strings or the 88 keys, whatever what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm not always articulating it like super well, but I think like just in being a good musician in general, there's just you should always come at it with a level of confidence, not arrogance, not cockiness, but confidence. Know what you're doing, know where you're going, know how to hit the guitar, know how to hit the drums, know how to make it sing, and then beyond that, just remember that the confidence that we have up there isn't a confidence of our own, but it's confidence from the Lord, and the calling that he's given us. And, so I think like that's kind of a lot of what's come out of the rock and roll world. And then I think for the other thing is man, just keep it fun, keep it fun and enjoy it. Don't overthink every single little part, I think one of the things in like today's kind of worship culture is everybody feels like they have to nail every single part exactly the same way is what's on the recording. And sometimes that doesn't work for live,
Right.
Sometimes live, you have to be a lot more aggressive. Full chords, but maybe when you get into a live situation, it needs to have a different kind of energy and just like you would in a regular rock band, you sort of have to listen for what the song needs in the moment. And so maybe instead of playing a low gain overdrive pedal with, a big open chord, maybe what you do is you crank it up a little bit more and you just play like a really aggressive rhythm using low octaves, or you just drive the heck out of the low E string in a single note, and so I think the other kind of thing that sort of comes out of the rock and roll world is just kind of listening to what the song needs in that moment, and being more concerned about what is needed in the moment rather than trying to 100% nail the parts. And which is kind of funny because me, I'm a stickler for people coming in and knowing the parts as well. But there's a time and a place where it's like sometimes it's like, hey man, that just doesn't feel right. Give me something more meaty. Give me something more. Well,
I think that's also part of your role as a leader. Like you're saying that when you're in a rock show, you're in a gig, like your head is always on a swivel. You're reading the room. And I think that a lot of people go into a service and have really no concept of the multiple levels that are happening on that stage at any given moment. It's like when you're the leader of that group, you are thinking about your parts and what you're doing next. You are thinking about your band and if they're doing their parts, if they're with you, you're worshiping on your own. You're giving it that. You're reading the room and watching, and you're kind of sensing like, are they with me? Is this not working? Like you're saying, do I need to punch it? Or hey, did I anticipate this was going to go bigger? Do I need to back off in this moment and go soft? Like those moments that you really have to be honed in on all of those things.
You're spinning 42 plates at a time.
Yeah. And then by the time you get off the stage, you're just like a puddle in the back. You're like, let me just wind down for a second. But just to always be on a pivot, just reading all of those things is it's a task. I mean, it's a glorious burden is the best way I can put it. You know what I mean? It's a labor of love, and it's one of those things that you get off, and there's sometimes that, man, you've given it every drop of energy and you rubbed every bit of spirit that you could get on it. And sometimes you walk off and go, I don't know if that was for anybody but me. But man, I did what I could to put the glory on it. And then you have to let God do the rest. For those moments that you're in those moments, I think, again, people think it might be a really easy thing that we we show up and we're playing these songs. Like you've been doing, now vocational ministry for a long time, occupational, for those seasons that people don't really, I think, tend to think about, because we're on stage, we're up front, and we look joyous and we're singing, we're making a joyful noise to the Lord, as the word says. But those moments when it's just hard, when you don't want to get up on the Sunday morning and show up, or those moments that you're like, man, I'm giving it all I've got and they're not singing back. What are those things that you do to keep yourself just going? Those moments that you keep yourself, you don't lose heart.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I think that's such an important one to understand for a lot of like the younger worship leaders that are coming up who are growing up with YouTube as their standard for what church services look like. They grew up thinking Hillsong and Elevation and Bethel and Maverick City and all these different things are the standard, when they don't realize the average church in America is 150 people. Yeah. And you don't normally have a rock and roll worship team. You normally have a lady who has been playing piano there for 82 years. Then you have a lady who plays flute. And then you got another lady who's got like a machine gun vibrato in her singing choir voice, trying to sing, and then you might get lucky and maybe you might have an acoustic guitar player in your church, right?
Yeah. And he's usually really gung-ho.
And he's usually really gung-ho. And so that's what the average church has to work with, So like, I feel very, very fortunate in the sense that like, I have the blessing of having like a full band and stuff like that. But I think what you have to remember is that you don't have to have those things to worship at all. You kind of have to remember that, like, the Lord doesn't look at the exterior, right? He's looking at the heart. He's looking at the what's true. He's not looking at what we look like on the outside. And so I think in those moments, you just have to remember, it's like, okay, is my heart truly surrendering to the Lord? And in those moments where we feel like we're maybe not enough, I think we have to remember that we don't have any power anyway to bring people to worship the Lord. Like the
We're
Lord
not making it happen.
No, the Lord reveals himself to us, and the Lord brings us near to him, and the Lord opens our eyes to worship him. And so I think in those moments, what you have to do is you have to remember that the Holy Spirit is moving, whether you are or not. The word says that his word goes out and never comes back void. And so, I think the big thing you have to remember is when people aren't singing and when people aren't raising their hands, that's not an indicator of a lack of leadership on your part. And that might not even be a sign of their insincerity. Some of them may just not be very physical, expressive worshipers.
Right.
Some of them may be just really kind of heady people where they're just thinking about the words. Mm-hmm. And then you have those few people that are like us that are spinning around in the back of the room with their hands in the air. But what you have to remember is that just because those people aren't responding in the way that you would like to see, or in the way that you measure success, particularly in church world, are they singing? Are their hands in the air? You have to remember that isn't any indicator of what's going on in their heart and their mind at that moment. Maybe that person walked into the church that morning and their marriage is on the rocks, and literally if they open their mouth, they're going to burst into tears. And so they stand there stoically letting the words and the truth of God like move in them, So I think in those moments, you just have to remember, okay, Lord, you are moving, like Waymaker says, even when I can't see it, and so you just have to trust that the Lord is moving. And you have to remember that even on those Sundays where, everything clicks and everyone's singing along and there are hands in the air, you didn't do that.
Right.
That wasn't you. That was the Holy Spirit moving. And, and two, I think it's also important to remember that if we experienced a worship service like that every single time, that would become mundane to us and it wouldn't be special. And so I think that's kind of one of the other things. No, I think that's kind of one of the other things that you have to remember is it's like, every time that one of those moments happens where the whole church is collectively together experiencing God in that same moment, those are special moments, man. And I think it makes you appreciate them all the more. And therefore, those moments where maybe they're not, the congregation isn't as engaged as you would want them to be, it makes those more valuable. And then I think the flip side, to that same coin is sometimes you do have to look at yourself. Maybe you just aren't a good leader. Maybe you're not picking the right songs for your congregation. Maybe that's not why they're singing. If you go in there and you try to sing "This Is Amazing Grace" to a room full of 95-year-olds, they're going to be mad at you because they're going to think that somehow it was going to be Amazing Grace, the song that they knew.
And you're doing it wrong.
And so you just have to understand too that, a lot of people have different expressions of worship and what pulls on their heartstrings may be different than what us young guys know. Yeah. And so, in particularly multi-generational ministry, sometimes you have to understand, okay, you know what, maybe it's my song selection that's not working out, and that's why they're not participating. And so I think it's important too to look at your own leadership in those situations. But if all of that is good to go, if you're confident in all that and they're still not responding, a lot of times it may just be that, hey, they're not, they're in a different headspace that morning than you are. And so you can't, you gotta, I think what I'm trying to say is you gotta have thick skin, you gotta have 100%. Thick skin doing what we do. Because you can't help but sometimes feel a sense of like, what's that movie, that line, like, are you not impressed?
Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained?
Gladiator.
Gladiator. Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes it kind of feels a little bit like that, but you have to remember, like, I'm just going to be faithful to what the Lord is, when I was praying about putting these songs in, I'm going to be faithful to go back to that thought and be like, okay, Lord, even if this room isn't responding the way I am, like, I just pray that, like, I heard you, right? I put these songs in, right? And I hope that you're speaking to somebody this morning, and sometimes, a lot of times the person he's speaking to is us. Like, he's saying, hey, you're not trusting me. You know what I mean? And so I think there's value in those moments, and I think you just have to see them for what they are,
Those moments that you, again, like the head being on a swivel and you're reading the room, and like you're saying, you are serving God and man. And if you're playing these things just for yourself, you're no longer taking care of these people that you've been entrusted with. I went through a season where it felt like no matter what song I was leading, I was just not getting any sort of response. And I was like, man, I feel like I'm not doing a good job of serving these people. And I started to look at kind of the median age that I was dealing with, and just maybe their backgrounds. And I thought, okay, I want to play stuff that, like, I picked one person in the audience, and I'm like, I want to build a set around this person's age group and maybe and I did this set that everything was literally 20 years old. And at the end of the service, this one dude came up to me. It was different than the guy I'd kind of picked in my mind. And he said, you did that song, was the last song you did this morning. And he was like, I just want you to know that, like, that really got me. Like, I felt like I super connected with that. And then, almost like God gave me this little token, this nugget. He said, and that one you've been doing, he said, I don't really know what it's called, and he picked this fairly new song. He goes, I really like that one too. He said, that's got a nice melody to it, or something like that. It was, he was meeting me where I was meeting him where he was. And then it was this moment where it's like, okay, I feel that there was like an endearing between those two moments, where you just have to understand, like, it's not about you. It's about, like you're saying, being sensitive and listening and doing the prayer and the work beforehand and going, okay, like, I trust you, God. And there's been, mornings where Sunday morning during sound check, I'm like, you know what? This is not the song that we're going to do anymore, because this just isn't going to work. And whatever this last minute addition is, that was the one that you watch, all of a sudden you just see it shift in the room, and you're like, okay, like, that was
all right.
That was the one. They really wanted to hear Breathe this morning. Fine.
No, I mean, that really is true, man. You gotta learn to read the room, and you gotta know who you're serving. If you go play a student camp, you're going to do a totally different selection of songs than if you're going to go lead a worship set at a retirement home. And I kind of got, I learned that the hard way. When I first got to my first church, Hillcrest Spanish Trail, it was an old church that was being revitalized. And literally we inherited about 75, 80-year-olds. In fact, the first week I was there, 3 people died. And so, like, it was literally a church that was dying off. And I came in there, thinking, okay, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do the new contemporary thing, and everybody's going to love it.
Guilty.
They hated it. And it was so discouraging because I was brand new into it. And I remember one of the nuggets of wisdom David gave me. He was like, hey man, ministry is a marathon, not a sprint. And I was like, oh, okay, I got to take the long game here. And he was like, yeah, man. He's like, one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to earn the trust of the people that you're leading, And I was like, okay, all right. And so out of that came our Wednesday night prayer meetings. And we had a lady named Miss Francis, and I love Miss Francis. She's like the best in the world. Her husband Butch, they're still at Spanish Trail. On Wednesday night, we would have a little pastor's Bible study, and I would get out the hymnal, and Miss Francis would play the keyboard, and people in the congregation would pick a hymn, and we'd open up to 492, Blessed Assurance, and I would, do my best to kind of, stab my way through singing these songs out of the hymnal. And I was probably terrible at it. The old people were probably like laughing at me because, I'm just not a hymnal guy. Yeah. I love hymns, but I don't know all the songs in the hymnal. And so, but that was the thing that kind of made them start to like me. Yeah. They saw that I was trying to meet them where they were, and I was trying to sing songs that spoke to their heart. And as I did that, I found that they had more grace for me in a lot of the newer songs. And by the time that I left 3 years later, they loved the contemporary worship. And it wasn't because of the songs. It was because they knew me. Like they knew their leader.
Earned their trust.
I'd earned their trust. And so, it might not be the song that they would listen to on a regular basis, but once they trusted me and realized, hey, like this is a song I feel like our congregation needs to hear and sing, they would say stuff like you were saying. They're like, I don't really love that song, but those words really got to me this morning, you know? And so, you kind of sort of realize like, all right, it's sort of it's a both and, you can bring people along and get them to like, a newer expression of worship. But the more important thing to realize is you have to earn the trust of your congregation, as their leader. And so that was a big one.
Hang on for a second. We got something to tell you.
Come on in to Carl's Arcade, where we have all the hottest video games, including Legend Seekers, Ninja Academy, and Jackalope Hunter.
Wow!
You're darn right, wow. At Carl's Arcade, you can win fun prizes, eat the cheesiest pizza, and try the all-new Tube of Mystery.
All right, so just put your hand in there and try to guess what it is. Is it pudding? Nope. Is it peanut butter? Wrong again. Well, what is it, mister? You don't want to know.
Located conveniently near the Windjammer Mall, behind Penny's Popsicles. Carl's Arcade. Live your adventure today.
Oh, boy!
It's so important to realize that, again, like you said, it's not about you, and you really need to, you kind of have to die to yourself. I mean, that's what ministry is all about. And kind of like your experience of going into Hillcrest with like, I'm the young guy and I'm going to shake it up with this modern stuff. When I started leading, here in Orlando, I remember having just such this attitude of, and I really didn't mean it to be cocky and I didn't mean it to be arrogant, but it truly was. And I came in, I thought, I'm the new guy and I'm going to help these guys, get in with the modern times. And I'm going to do these songs that I've been doing for years at another location, and it's going to work just as well. And, I'm expecting them to get it. And the probably one of the greatest, hardest lessons that I had, I'd been there for 3 weeks, and I was invited out to dinner. Somebody in the church was having. We had gone to a restaurant, and this lady comes over and she says, "Hi, I want to introduce myself. I'm, Sister so and so." And I was like, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you." And I'm like, "This is great. Like these people they're liking me and they're liking my stuff." And she said, "That thing you do on Sundays where you'll be doing a chorus and you'll sing and you kind of back up and you want the room to sing?" And I said, "Yeah." And I'm all excited. And she says with a smile on her face, she goes, "We hate that." And I was like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea how to respond. I was like dumbfounded. It was like somebody hit me in the face with a wet towel. I was like, okay. And so I thought, well, dang, this is this thing that I kind of do. It's like part of it's one of my, it's in my bag of tricks. And so, Jordan, I'm telling you, for like probably 2 months, I was like, I can't do that anymore. But then every so often I'd kind of introduce it a little bit, but I'd kind of maybe back off. And I'd still sing out, but not directly to the microphone, still to kind of be like, come on, like get into it a little bit. Yeah. But I was still trying not to not offend, but I didn't want these people to be taking part in this experience that was so uncomfortable that they were just totally checked out. And it's one of those, you go in with good intentions, but it's still this bit of arrogance. And it's almost like you get this loving tap on the head to go, all right, reel it in, big guy.
No, that's seriously it, man. That was a real eye opener for me, because I used to be so critical of, other people in the way that they would sort of express their worship on their team or from the stage. And, thinking that, man, if they were just doing the newest rock and roll stuff, man, it'd be great,
Cause I have the answers.
Because I have the answers, right? It's so arrogant. And same kind of thing, man, like the Lord just kind of, through being able to make those connections with those older folks and really realize the value of different expressions of worship, it makes you a better worship leader and it makes you a better vessel for God to use. Yeah. And it humbles you, it really does. And I think that's, I think that's one of the biggest issues with a lot of younger worship leaders. And really probably just anybody in youth, you think everything. And, sure. And then when you actually get into it, and you, particularly for us that are in multi-generational ministries, where we're leading people from, 75 years old down to 15, not everybody's going to like every song. Like you have to learn that really, really quick, and it doesn't necessarily mean, I do think you have to be consistent in sort of like the way that you do some of your songs, like we do a hymn a lot, or we might even do something that's a little more adult contemporary, like we did that song, Great I Am, a couple of weeks ago. And, when I listened to it, I don't remember that song sounding like instrumentally kind of as cheesy as it does, but it's kind of dated, instrumentally, but lyrically it's so dadgum powerful. And we did it at church a couple of weeks ago and I was just like, holy cow, this is such a good song. But I was so tempted to write it off just because it's got a little bit of that adult CCM kind of thing. But that song was a massive blessing to, a ton of the people in our church, right. And when you kind of rearrange it with your band and that kind of thing, you can take a song that lyrically and melodically and all that really hits home for a lot of people. And you can still kind of make it a fun thing, for you as a musician to do and that kind of thing. But I think it's incredibly important to understand that not everybody expresses their worship in the same way. Not all songs move everybody the same way. Yeah. And that's okay. I think it's our job to learn, like we've said several times now, you learn to read the room, you learn to read your audience. What can I do to serve this group in a way that brings them closer to the Lord? And if that's me singing songs that I don't particularly love, but this congregation does, well, then I need to do that. We're there to serve them. Yeah. And so,
And those moments that you've gone through the mud, you've gone through all those things. And then it's those little moments when it just seems like everything goes off without a hitch. Every D over F sharp just rings true. And you're like, and you kind of make eye contact with somebody on the team and you're like, this is the greatest thing. And this is like, it's right at the moment that you're like, okay, I've quit 13 times already this morning, but then this is the thing that draws you back in and goes, okay, like this is why we do this. And I feel like it's about those little moments. And to be honest, it's those Sundays when I'm like, everything's going really good. We sound awesome. And then I play like one wrong note and I'm like, there we go. We're back into the humble pile. And I'm glad that happened because I can't say that I did this all on my own. And you just,
I tell you, I still find that the mornings that are the biggest struggle are the mornings that end up being like the best worship services,
Absolutely.
Where you just feel like you were struggling through the entire set for whatever reason, maybe your band's not killing it, or maybe you're just mentally checked out. You're thinking about one of the 42 plates you're spinning, and you get off stage just feeling like you failed. And then you have 42 people come up to you after the service and tell you, just what a moving service it was for you. And you're like, okay, wow. Again, really? I have nothing to do with this. It's all the Lord, and all that. But I think in those moments where you feel discouraged, it's important to remember that, the things we already talked about, but then too, to remember, hey man, there's 52 Sundays a year, some weeks aren't going to be great. Some weeks are going to be amazing. I think, just the fact that we're in the North American church, there is a sense of complacency sometimes too. Yeah. I think there's a lot of factors that kind of play into it. I think if we were at church in China and having to hide out in the room, we'd probably be a lot more passionate about, our worship and things like that. But yeah, in those moments, I think you just have to remember, man, like, you've been called to serve Christ and to serve people, and how he chooses to move is on him. All you do is make yourself available, so you can't beat yourself up too much, I guess is what I'm saying,
Looking at everything you've been through in this journey, and kind of laughing at the idea of even jumping into it now, having done it years, what are some things that you wish that someone would have told you ahead of time?
Oh man. About ministry in general?
Sure.
So I think
ministry, band leading, any of those things,
man. I've said this a lot over the years. I think I've even said this to you. I think the biggest lesson that I've kind of learned in everything, and I think most people should really adopt this, is that we're serving people, and at the end of the day, people matter more than the product that they provide for our worship teams and for our church services.
Yeah.
We're called to pastor these people. We're called to serve these people, and we're called to add value to their lives, not cause them hurt, and so, I can look back on a couple of situations where I don't feel like I probably handled them the way that I should have, because I was thinking about myself and my ministry and what it was going to cause there. And so where maybe I should have had some more grace for some people, I was just like, you know what? Nope, we're just going to go ahead and cut you from the roster and see you later. Because I want my life to be easy. And I don't think that is the right way to go about that at all. And so I think I wish I just early on would have remembered, or been conscious of the fact that, hey, people matter more than the product, than the service they bring to your church. Yeah. And so, that's not to say that there's not a time and a place that you have to have some hard conversations sometimes, but I can look back on my attitude back then, and I know that I was thinking about myself and my ministry rather than thinking about what was best for that person.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned, is it's just the people that we serve and the calling that we have. We got to remember that, man, those people matter, and we need to be adding value into their life and speaking God's truth into their life and treating them with the same grace and mercy that's been extended to us. And I know that sounds like a really churchy answer, but I think sometimes it's the simplest things that are the most, monumental things. I think that one matters a lot. I think being in ministry, there's a lot of maturing that has to go on, because one of the things that I've discovered is really tough in ministry is that, I am also a member at my church. And I work there, but I also attend there. I've always kind of sort of thought of Sunday morning not as my job. Like, I just happen to be serving at my church as the worship leader. Now, during the week when I'm doing admin stuff and scheduling and all that, that's definitely work. But on Sunday, that is my church. And it's important for me to be sitting in my church under my pastor, learning from him, and not just thinking of Sunday morning as my job. It's so tempting to just sit in the green room and hang out, and check out for a few minutes, when it's not. No, I need to be sitting in the service, and I need to be being fed by my pastor. I need to remember that my church and my occupation, while they are at the same place, they serve two different purposes. One feeds my kids, one feeds my soul. And I think that's something that a lot of us miss out on, is that we will maybe be frustrated with something in the occupational side of our job, and we'll let that sour our membership to our church.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of a big lesson that I've learned. To not let your job frustrations sour you against the church. People are people, and you're going to bump heads, and you're going to disagree, and that's okay. There's ways to sort of work around that, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I've done that before. And I think that's an important one to remember. Keep your occupation and keep your church membership distinct from each other, as best you can. Not easy, but that I feel like that's a pretty important one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
years go on, you leave this earth, you go on to the great gig in the sky, as Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
What is the legacy that you want to leave behind? Like when the world looks at your time here, the people that have been in your life, like what is the thing that like they like when they think of you that's synonymous with that?
Man.
We got deep.
I know, man. I think it's going to be a combination of things. So I do hope that I'm remembered for being sincere and
I can
and I don't know. I guess this is just, I don't know. It's cliche, but I want to be just kind of a real person. I don't really know. I don't really feel like I know how to put on very well. Like I'm only kind of happy and good when I'm really just in my skin, just sort of being me.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to like politic very well. I don't know how to put on a face and shake a hand. I mean, sometimes I feel so cheesy on like a Sunday morning because I'm so excited. I'm like, hey guys, welcome to church. And I'm like, that's not really my personality a lot of times. Like I'm kind of subdued, and I think most people that know me, I mean, I would hope that, they just kind of think of Jordan as just a normal, consistent, real guy,
Yeah.
I hope that, I hope that people, will say that I was someone that they believe was after the heart of God. I mean, that's an important one for me. I don't always get it right, but I do feel like that's, what I'm always kind of striving to do. And I'm striving to live my life through that way and through the convictions of his spirit and through the instructions of his word. And, I don't walk around with a, Christ is King, Harley Davidson, cheesy shirt or something, but I hope that my actions and all that kind of stuff will indicate, to people that like I lived a Christ-like life,
Yeah.
I don't know. It is kind of, it's funny that you asked that. Cause like, I mean, I'm not old by any means. I'm 37, but like, I definitely think about my mortality and things like that far more today than I ever did before. I think having 3 kids, you just sort of naturally do that. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think really, man, like, as I get older and like I appreciate my dad more and more and more, and I realize like what a good dad he is, and my mom and what a good mom she is. Like I just want my kids to think the same thing about me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though I'm an adult and I understand that my dad's just a guy, he's just a dude. Like my dad still has that element of Superman to me. You know what I mean? Like. And I hope that my kids always have that, I mean, I've realized that he just did the best he could, raising me, and my mom saying, my parents are still together and everything. But, I just hope that, my kids look back on me as a father who was present, as a father who was active with them. I mean, that's one thing I really have to try to like remember is that I get essentially 2.5 hours a day with my kids. I mean, I come home at 5:00, they go to bed at 7:30. So I get 2.5 hours a day like invest in my kids, so I hope they remember me getting down on the floor and wrestling with them. As far as like the music side, I don't really care if anybody remembers that part, I mean, to me that it's weird. I mean, of course, like I would hope people would remember like, yeah, Jordan was a great guitar player. Sure. That feels good to think about, but like, honestly, man, I really I don't know. I hope if people look back on it, it's like, man, that guy made an impact on my life. Like, I don't really want it to be, I don't remember him being a guitar player. I want people to say, man, like, I'm really glad he just took time to hang out with me, if that makes any sense. And so, I don't know. I guess
you said at the beginning, as a kid, you wanted to be a person who played guitar and helped people. And for me, I think that is so much of your legacy. You've given so much of your time to teaching and to pouring into people. And again, like those late nights where you could have been doing anything else, but you're like, yeah, let's spend 2 or 3 hours sitting on the floor, teaching you how to wire a pedal board, or here's how to play these chords better. Here's how to be intentional. Like you're pouring yourself into those people. And I think that's going to be a huge portion of your legacy.
Yeah.
Is you you're a guy, you like to play guitar and you help people, that you poured, your heart and soul into those people.
I think if there's one thing that would excite me, it's like, I talk a lot about that Jeremy Lloyd guy. Like everything I'm trying to do is essentially trying to be like Jeremy. Like, I hope that I inspire some 16-year-old kid to go, you know what? Jordan took the time with me. I'm going to take the time with this 14-year-old kid. Yeah. And then I just hope there's like a multiplication effect where, so-and-so helped so-and-so, so-and-so helped so-and-so, so-and helped so-and-so. And it just keeps going on and on. It's kind of like that one, I think it's like a bank commercial where like somebody does a good deed and then it just kind of keeps spreading. Like everybody keeps doing one for the next person and the next person,
Yeah.
I just hope it's kind of something like that, man. I hope if I have any legacy, it's that someone will understand, okay, like I should pursue the Lord, like the Lord was faithful to Jordan, the Lord will be faithful to me. I should pursue the Lord. If Jordan took time to hang out with me, I want to take time to hang out with people, like, I don't know. Yeah. So I guess just that attitude of wanting to pour into other people and see other people succeed, and making sure that the knowledge that was given to you and the chance that was taken on you, making sure that I take that chance on somebody and then that person takes a chance on somebody. And so I don't know, I guess that's it, man. And then obviously I just want my kids, man. I want my kids to remember that dad was present. I want my wife to remember that, I tried my best, I wasn't easily lovable, but I tried my best, and, I want them to legitimately miss being around me. I don't want to kick the bucket and then be like, man, I'm glad they're gone, like, and I don't think they will be, but that's definitely something I think about. I want to be not mourned, but missed.
Yeah. That's fair.
I don't know. I don't know how to, to be honest, this is like the first time I think I've ever answered a question like this. So never really put a whole lot of thought into it outside of maybe just internally, but so it's kind of weird to articulate it out loud.
Well,
everything feels wrong.
Figuring it out together and with, everybody else who's sitting around the proverbial table with us, listening to this conversation.
That's it. So, but yeah, man, so that's I guess that's it, man. I just want to be remembered as somebody that pursued Jesus and loved people.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the greatest.
If I were to boil it down.
I love it.
How about you? How do you want to be remembered?
Okay. So I was unfair to you by popping that on you. And now you're flipping the table. Those whole Enneagram things, like you take the Enneagram and I come, I'm a 2. And so it's like, it's the helper. It's the person that is, an empath or altruistic, just like I want, when I see people's hurt or I see things they're going through, like I love to jump in to be like, what can I do? How can I help? Like I don't want to see my friends struggle or hurt. And so I think that'd be my legacy, that people look back and be like, man, like whatever you're going through, I knew he was solid. Like he was there. He was always in the, like right down to the mud with me or in the fight with an encouraging word and just like, kind smile and pointing me to the dream and to Jesus and like helping me march forward. So I think that's probably my short answer. I don't have a wife and kids yet to be remembered by, but I guess all those that I'm, around, I think that would be that, like when people look back and go like, man, like he was the real deal, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I want people to look back and be like, the way that I talk about Jeremy and David Wiggins, like I want people to talk about me that way. That's, it made me feel good.
Yeah. I dig it.
So I'm terrified of the fact that people are going to be listening to this, man. I feel really vulnerable.
Well, it's a safe space. And, I think our audience hopefully are kind and loving and receive it. And I hope that they're inspired, that if they are in this phase of life and whether they're in ministry or not, that just kind of those lessons and the pitfalls and stuff that we've been through, that it's inspired them, that it's encouraged them maybe to hang in there one more Sunday or whatever it is, to just be like, man, like you're not alone, and just be real about it, people, and just keep plugging in, keep marching forward.
Yeah, 100%, man. 100%.
Yeah.
So.
Jordan, thank you.
This was fun.
This was great.
Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Once again, I'd like to thank our guest, Jordan Christie, for spending some time with us. Want more of The Zach Brown Show? Check out the entire backlog of episodes on your favorite streaming service. You can also follow on Instagram and give us a like on Facebook. I'll post behind-the-scenes pictures and updates on all the latest episodes, so like, follow, comment, and subscribe. And if you're enjoying the show, I'd very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to leave a review in iTunes. They're very helpful in getting the show to more listeners, and more listeners means more friends, and that's just good for everybody. And now you can get your very own Zach Brown Show merch over at tpublic.com. I'm Zach Brown, and I want you to remember, giraffes have a difficult time riding unicycles. Have a good one.